All right, folks. Well, it's 10 o'clock here in Minneapolis area. I think it's time we get started with our webinar here. So thank you all for joining us today. I'm hoping to, between myself and George here, demystify some of the new products that are coming out from UiPath around process intelligence and process discovery today. So with that, let us get kicked off here. So today, two of us, George and myself, Tyler Safronov, will be speaking to you. I'm a senior consultant at Ashling Partners, specifically focused on process intelligence products, um, such as process mining, task capture, automation hub, so on and so forth. George, do you want to give a quick intro on yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for making the time, everyone, today. So my name is George Rawi. I'm part of the pre-sales team at UiPath. I've been part of the company for about 3 years now. Based in San Jose, in California, I work with a lot of our West Coast customers, as well as our key accounts customers on implementing automation through UiPath. Yep.
George, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
So, as mentioned, we want to talk to you about process intelligence. What is process intelligence? It's a new term that's being thrown around here quite a lot. If you're, in the automation space. So we'll take you through what it is, what makes it different from some of the other technologies, and then dive deep on, the technologies that UiPath has in that category. So process mining, task capture, automation hub. And then finally, ultimately, we want to teach you and help you understand when is the right time to utilize these tools, and when is the wrong time. So, with that, I think we can jump right into it. So, as mentioned, our purpose today, there's a lot of new technologies from UiPath, specifically around process and task discovery, and of course, there's a lot of questions about how do I know which one to use. Process mining, task capture, they all, tell you things about your process, but they tell you things in a little bit different way. So you've got to be able to understand what you'll get from them and how to actually implement them to make the right choices. What is process intelligence? Process intelligence, it's not just a buzzword. It is really a new category of analytics in my mind, and I think in the minds of most people looking at the space now. It's really a sub-discipline within analytics and reporting that is distinct from business intelligence. And specifically, process intelligence is all about kind of informing you what is your process actually doing as opposed to where you're at with your business. So, typical business intelligence tools like Power BI, Tableau, Alteryx, even UiPath Insights and Elk Stack. Those tools are going to give you, nice visualizations. They're going to, you're going to be able to program in SQL type queries into them and get data back, very specific to what you're looking for. They're very flexible. But some of the things that process intelligence does that business intelligence does not do, such as process mining and task mining, is going to give you really a time-based view of your process, and lead to insights specifically around how to sort of improve your process, and give you kind of the instant replay of what's going on within your process to, specifically arrive at where you are with your data today. And then within process intelligence, I kind of think of task capture and automation hub, maybe not as exact process intelligence products per se, but certainly kind of fit into this family and fit into the entire analytics and reporting framework to allow you to really sort of manage some of the insights and opportunities that are coming out of, process mining and task mining, or even Power BI type reports. So again, business intelligence really has been the standard way of reporting, the standard way of looking at data. You run a query, you get a snapshot of what your data looks like on that day, and then you've got to run that again and get some new data the next day. Process mining and task mining are really going to, again, take that longitudinal view, the time-based view, to give you sort of an instant replay of how your process and how your your process arrive to where it is at today. And then I'll kind of help differentiate task capture and automation hub here a little bit later on here. So specifically, let's dive right into our definitions of each technology, and we'll start with process mining, which I believe, excuse me, George, why don't you take us away here and kind of dive into each one a little bit, if you don't mind, and just give us your view on where they each kind of fit in.
Absolutely. I mean, everyone knows here that UiPath is traditionally an RPA company, eventually migrated into or moved into an automation platform and automation suite. So as part of that suite, we do have a discovery phase where some of our customers were looking to manage their pipeline, continue on enhancing their pipeline, identifying processes across different departments. And the way they were basically doing it is kind of an interview process. You'd go ahead and ask your SMEs around your processes and try to understand exactly how they did it, and eventually generate what we call a process design document to eventually share with your team to start developing the automation. So what we found is, why not leverage tools to actually or technology to actually identify these opportunities, make sure you're actually managing your pipeline the right way and actually achieving the ROI that you'd like to get to. So we presented 4 major tools. I'd like to call them 3, but there's 4 here. Task mining, which gives you the details of the interactions and records the interactions of users with the different applications. This is typically done whenever you have a population of users that have the same activity going on. I'm not going to go too much into details here. Tyler's going to explain a lot more. But you have a population of users that are going over a task, a daily task every day, and you'd like to identify what that is. That task usually is not happening within a system. It's happening across several. So you have that interaction recording, I would say, that you generate, and with some AI, you are able to identify patterns. Process mining is more of the kind of overview or end-to-end process that you're able to mine based on data that is actually generated from your different systems. It could be a financial system, an HR system, an IT system. All those logs that exist can be ingested into our process mining tool and allow you to dive into different dimensions of your process, identifying bottlenecks and automation potential. But everything kind of falls into or feeds into what we call Automation Hub. So in my personal view, I believe like this is one of our most important products. It allows humans across the enterprise to actually participate in this automation journey. I would say that the enterprise is actually undertaking, as well as getting all the information that we generated across task mining and process mining, putting it all into a same pipeline with a lot of different metrics from the business in terms of hours spent on a process, number of employees, the actual salary of a specific hourly salary of an employee, et cetera, allows you to get into the specific ROI and returns that you're expecting after automation. And for us to get into a more in-depth, I would say, or get more in-depth information of that process that we're looking to automate, Automation Hub offers you what we call task capture. I'd like to call it a kind of a more personal version of task mining, where one person is able to record that process in a clean way and provide you all the information necessary to start developing your process from ideation directly.
Awesome. And that concludes our webinar. Thank you, everyone. Just kidding. Thank you, George. Appreciate that overview. So let's dive into the specifics here of process mining first and foremost, because I think it's the most well-known process intelligence tool in the toolbox, maybe aside from Automation Hub. But specifically, what is process mining? How is it different, from other analytical techniques? And as you heard George talking about, process mining really takes that log data that is typically generated in major, shared systems that are, systems of record for your enterprise. Those change logs are typically stored due to, audit requirements and, needing to be able to see specific things that are happening within your system. But they're rarely leveraged in a business intelligence type report. Typically, this is because they're hard to work with. It's a huge volume of data that is not conducive to performance BI reporting. but there's, with that amount of data, there's a huge amount of value that you can get out of it. So process mining really tackled the challenge of, taking those logs and making them usable, not only to, an auditor looking at one specific case, but to the entire business looking at their entire process flow. And so process mining is really, it's all about telling that objective story of your end-to-end business process, rather than, again, having to sit in with process SMEs and get their subjective opinions. Of course, they're knowledgeable, but ultimately their subjective opinions about the process and how it should work. Process mining takes the opposite approach and says, this is the data, now tell us why the process works this way. And ultimately what you're able to do with that is explore the impact of those process deviations on your high-level business KPIs and metrics. So, you can really, with an order to cash business process, using process mining, you could look at, what are the reasons that lead to a order being shipped late or not in full. You can start to break down those correlations between, specific process deviations that may impact, that ability to ship to your customers on time. So that's really the value of process mining right there. And then it allows you to, again, have even more productive conversations with those domain knowledge experts and the process SMEs. All right, so the data journey for process mining looks like this. You've essentially got your data sources, your main systems of record, your SAPs, your Salesforces, whatever your Oracles, whatever system you're running your main processes on, typically, stores a lot of data in a back-end database that we then essentially access with an API call or an ODBC call, or even a manual extraction from like an ABAP system, or even CSV files extracted from the source system. So this is data that's already stored and generated by those source systems, that's then kind of read and transformed by process mining. So process mining has its own kind of ETL layer that you essentially take that raw data and transform it into an event log, and into the proper format for then visualizing and understanding your process. So once you've got it into this visualization layer, you're really able to explore and actually do that business analysis that is so valuable. So it's really, about transforming that data and making it freely available and then explorable to your end users and your business analysts that will eventually be able to turn those insights into real value for your company. So again, data sources being, the main systems of record, and then really following that process from, more so from the actual transactional document perspective, rather than the end user perspective or the user who's performing those particular actions. So we'll get into that just a little bit here more. With process mining, you've got a holistic view of that end-to-end process, and UiPath offers a host of out-of-the-box dashboards that yield a lot of great perspectives. And UiPath has really done a nice job of really bringing to the surface the main insights that you'd want to see out of your process. So there's very little actual time that you need to spend on building out new dashboards or new analyses. I find in my experience that you're typically spending most of your time just assembling the event log and making sure you've got all the events in there. And then once you've got the events that you need to see, the dashboards that you get out of the box are often more than enough to give you a great deal of insight and direction in terms of understanding where you have opportunities to improve your process or even automate particular steps. So, and we can take a look at those in our demo here next. So, we at Ashling Partners have really been interested, particularly in healthcare. There's a huge opportunity in healthcare, as we've seen over the last year, to improve process efficiency and really just drive better outcomes and better health for all, anybody. So we've created a hospital billing demo, which I will share now, so I can kind of walk through how we would use process mining to look at like a hospital billing use case, and then identify some opportunities, and then route it maybe into Automation Hub for an automation idea. So Let me pull that up real quick here. Just 1 second.
While you do that, Tyler, I do want to mention that all these products are integrated together. So eventually moving from one phase of discovery into the other is seamless somewhat, where you are able to identify the specific idea within process mining and start moving within the rest of the products wherever the need be as well.
Yeah. Yeah, great call out. And I think that's, another point to make here at the end of the event, but specifically, all of these technologies are really starting to coalesce and converge, and I see in the near future, kind of a super process intelligence product that would be a combination of, or integrated, between all of these products. But it's future state. Let's not confuse that right now. So anyway, here is our process mining hospital billing process model. What we're looking at here are really, hospital cases, which, represent essentially somebody visiting the hospital, getting a diagnosis, and then, being billed for that visit and that whatever, diagnosis they need to be billed for. So we've got 100,000 cases over a period of about 3 years here in this demo data set. This data set is taking actually from the University of Eindhoven. It's actually the birthplace of process mining. Will van der Alst, Professor Will van der Alst, the godfather of process mining, and has quite a collection of process mining event logs out there. So that's what we're using here today. So the process really reflects a hospital process in the Netherlands, but it's not all too different from the processes we see here in North America. So we've got 100,000 cases, so 100,000 visits to the hospital in this data set. We've got 450,000 events that are comprised of kind of 16 different activities. And so what that means is we've got, across these 100,000 cases, we see, almost 500,000 different things happening within the life cycle of those cases, from the initial visit to the actual final billing. And those events are comprised of these activities that you see here in this column. So we've got, cases being created in the system, finalized and being released to billing and being billed. And then we've also got some of the coding confirmations that are, very important in hospital diagnoses and billing. Then we also see some of the less common events, such as changes to those diagnoses, deletions of the cases being reopened. This is where we can really get into understanding, what are the process deviations that are driving inefficiencies in our process. So, from here, what you typically find is, this is the classic process mining process graph. Again, we're following a case throughout the process. So what we can understand here is we've got, 100,000 new cases created. We see roughly 42,000 of those cases have some kind of diagnosis change on them, which is relatively high. I would think we'd want to get that diagnosis right the first time. And sometimes we even see multiple loops of diagnoses being changed multiple times. So that could be an interesting thing to explore and try to understand, if there's a particular, maybe there's a particular doctor or a particular team that has, problems getting the diagnosis right on the first time. Or we also see things like case coding being incorrect. So we see, roughly 3,000 cases where the coding is incorrect. Maybe the diagnosis is right, but the coding of that diagnosis is incorrect. So that might be another area to explore here. But generally, what we see is straight down the middle is typically what we call the happy path of our process, moving from, new case created to finalizing that case, being released to billing, confirming the coding, and then finally being billed. Ideally, that's how our process should work every time. But now, like I said, we've got some deviations that we want to explore. So let's do that now. So I'm going to actually look specifically at case coding incorrect. I think that could be, an easy fix based on, what I'm seeing here. Really a coding error could seems more like an administrative error than perhaps a diagnosis or more of a functional error in the hospital processes. So let's take a look at these and see if we can find any correlations here that may indicate, what may be the root cause of this case coding incorrect. So what I'll do is actually select this activity, and what I'll have is now, every single case where we had a case coding incorrect activity occur. So we can already see, maybe there's a little bit of a correlation here across the case type, and these have kind of all been anonymized, so we don't have specifics in terms of what those case types are. Don't really see a strong correlation across, C, A, or B being, indicative of the case type being a root cause. But I can actually pivot this by a number of different things. So what we've actually got here is an initial diagnosis code. And so when I flip to what the initial diagnosis was, we see, a very strong high number here where that initial diagnosis is PD. Almost half of them within our 3,000 cases are PD initial diagnosis. So what that tells me is we've got perhaps some kind of coding defect within, when we have a diagnosis of a PD. We need to, either correct the system to pick the correct code, or we have, maybe we install a bot that will essentially check that code and update the code to make sure that we've got the right code for this particular diagnosis. What we can do from here is actually start to peel apart, how many manual touches or how many, things are actually going wrong, or what's the actual dollars impact on our process based on the number of activities that are occurring, number of manual activities that are actually occurring in our process. So we can look at, actually I'll jump to our automation tab. Oop. Don't have automation marked in this particular demo. Everything is manual in this demo. So what we can do here is look at our, average repetitions within the case, start to understand, how many kind of repetitive activities we may be having, and then start to calculate exactly, when we have a case coding incorrect error, what are the kind of routes that we need to take after that actually occurs. And so to do that, we can add a filter, which is I think one of the best filters in the entire process mining suite here, to go set up essentially boundary activities to say, what are my from activities and what are my to activities. I'm just going to set my initial boundary activity as case coding incorrect, so that I can understand what happens after that case coding incorrect activity occurs. So now what I've done is essentially chopped off the entire top half of my event log, so I can start to really peel apart and understand what's going on after this case coding incorrect activity actually occurs. So in a lot of these cases, we're seeing, some of these are going straight to billing, which could be a big problem for us if we've got incorrect case codes. We may not be actually billing them for the correct diagnosis or correct procedures. But we do also see a lot of them are being, reopened. A lot of these cases are going back to a reopen status. Diagnoses are being changed and then refinalized. So there's a lot of rework here that we could start to peel apart and really make a solid business case for, either correcting the system behavior that's leading to this incorrect code, or implementing a bot. And so this is how essentially, if we say at each point here, an activity takes, maybe 5 minutes to change the diagnosis, refinalize, you can easily start to calculate the amount of time that you could get back, or even the amount of money that you could get back for automating this particular. So that is our hospital billing demo. We could certainly spend all day and probably an entire webinar just on hospital billing and value engineering, which we may do. But at this point, I think we'll jump to the next topic here, which is, what is the difference between process mining and task mining specifically? So let me share my slides here. And actually, I'll talk through a specific use case first of what we were able to accomplish through, a process mining project that we recently ran with a electrical manufacturer. So we had a client that was really eager to understand their indirect procurement process. Most of their P2P process was on SAP, but they also had a custom purchase requisitioning system on the front end to handle some of those indirect purchase requests for materials. And so our challenge was really to, identify automation and process optimization opportunities, and then further kind of quantify the value potential and make recommendations on, the root cause of those particular process deviations or inefficiencies. And so essentially what we were able to do was we took the existing UiPath SAP purchase to pay connector, which has, about 80% of the activities you would need within that purchase to pay process from an SAP perspective, and enhanced it to include activities from that custom purchase requisition system. So we actually had a view of, multiple systems in our process mining model, showing us a process kind of end to end across systems. And so what we then did was really looked at the most common manual touch points, use some APQC benchmarks to guide us in terms of what, may be opportunity for enhancement from a benchmarking perspective, an industry peer benchmarking perspective, and then really calculate the overall value potential to deliver back to the business. So in all, we were able to identify over 200,000 in savings potential, which was all backed by, empirical data from process mining. So there was really no question in terms of what was the value potential being given back. I think a lot of times, in our discussions with automation COEs, they just feel that some of those value potentials are soft. It's hard to get a good quantification of value back or potential ROI. And even after you've implemented, it's sometimes hard to understand what you're actually getting back after you've done an automation. But process mining really, again, allows you to see the discrete steps and make a really, empirically backed calculation of what those savings potential or value potential could be. And then kind of furthermore, we just kind of fortified that their business case for a strategic move to a more kind of robust e-procurement system. So as mentioned, they were kind of using a custom requisition system on the front end. But, with the typical like SAP Ariba, you've got a lot more integration options from integrating with vendors. So there's a huge value potential there. So that was what we were able to do, specifically with process mining in this case. Now, when we talk about process mining and perhaps like where some of the shortcomings may come into play, what you see with process mining is a typical end-to-end process that's focused specifically on, a transactional item. So in an order to cash process, we're looking at, sales order line items. Purchase to pay, we're looking at purchase order line items. And, as we saw with hospital billing, we're looking at, hospital cases. This sometimes, doesn't give you the full picture of what's happening, and we're very much bound by what data is captured by the system. So it's process mining is great for depicting those big end-to-end processes, but it's hard to get the details of what actually goes into each step from a user perspective. So that's where we turn to task mining to really help illuminate what's happening. That goes the manual work that goes into each kind of process step that we see within process mining. So, looking at this chart over here on the right-hand side, you can kind of think of task mining as being able to show you, the steps, the actual user steps that a user has to take to, for example, confirm an order. Perhaps they got to open up SAP. They see an order that needs an order confirmation. They've got to jump out to an Excel spreadsheet to see, who the vendor is or who their contact is from a vendor perspective. Maybe they've got to email a production manager to figure out if they can, get the product out on time. They return to SAP, and then they finally confirm that order for a specific date. That is, those steps are all invisible to process mining because it's not actually occurring in SAP or your system of record. And so, we would actually need a tool that could record the desktop clicks that user is taking to actually understand, how often are they doing this? How long does it take them? How many steps are there in the process just to get that order confirmation completed in SAP? So that's where task mining comes in. We can record those steps. We set up, specific applications we want to look at, and then we can start to understand what are the actual steps from a user perspective that need to occur, as opposed to having more of the transactional process perspective in the process mining space. And so task mining is really starting to leverage more of that AI and OCR to analyze how the people get the work done, as opposed to how the process, the overall process efficiency. So you can start to understand, what are the specific activities they perform, how often they perform them, how long does it take them, how many clicks does it take them, all this good stuff. And so the way that it works, typically within task mining, you're going to essentially deploy the task mining recorder client to your end users. So that can all be done from the Automation Cloud hub, and I've got a demo here to show you. But the basic process is task mining recorder gets installed, you capture data. Once that data is all collected, you run it through an OCR and AI package in UiPath Automation Cloud, which attempts to cluster and add context to activities that it sees within the data set, which consists of clicks, scrolls, timestamps, and screenshots of the user activity. Then it's going to kind of try to match it up and find the correct path, or what activities are all related to one another based on specific elements that it can find within each screenshot. And then finally, you're going to be able to kind of close those execution gaps using the insight that you get out of task mining. So yeah, like I said, I want to just run through. I've got a quick demo to show you here from a task mining perspective, so you can really see how this setup takes place, and what a task mining project, what the output actually looks like when you've completed your task mining project. So just take a quick view of this particular video. Share.
Hello. In this video, I'm going to introduce you to an exciting new tool called UiPath Task Mining. Task mining analyzes employees' day-to-day desktop activities and applies artificial intelligence to identify repetitive tasks which have high potential for automation. This accelerates process discovery and will help drive more pipeline for automation.
So here they're setting up the use case. Beth is an automation COE champion, obviously charged with getting, driving automation in her organization. Standard method for collecting automation ideas have probably dried up. So, your user interviews where you say, hey, what do you guys want us to automate? You just, at a certain point, you start to plateau and people just don't have that many more ideas. So that's where task mining really comes in and is useful for driving that pipeline and filling your pipeline with more automation ideas. So Beth is in that position now. She's trying to, again, drive more of that automation and identify opportunities without having more of these, powwow meetings where everybody gets in a room and says, what they think they can automate. And so they've decided to use task
AI to scientifically identify automation opportunities. The first step in Beth's task mining project is to collect employee desktop data without interrupting their work. She will log in as an administrator, create a project, and then invite the employees to install the desktop app to observe their activities. The next step is to configure the settings, such as creating a list of approved applications to record. This ensures privacy and data protection concerns are managed, as the desktop recorder will not collect data from applications not on this list. As you can see, it only takes a few minutes for Beth to set up a new project. Let's now meet one of our business users, Alex, who is an accounts payable specialist on the finance team.
So what Beth is able to do is essentially, manage the entire project from the UiPath Automation Cloud. including inviting users and setting the users up with task mining. So she can actually send emails, as you see here, to the end users that she wants to have included in the task mining study. And they get this email and then a little link that says install now, which then enables them to actually start installing and recording that particular their processes.
As one of the users who Beth invited to record their work application.
So then, the task mining client is really just a little bug that sits over here on the right-hand side of your screen and says, hey, you're recording or you're not recording, and you even have the ability then to add particular applications to your whitelist. So as you saw previously, Beth had set up the applications that she wanted to record. So she wants to record Chrome, Microsoft Excel, and Microsoft Outlook. Now this user, once they've set up task mining, perhaps they say, oh, I actually use my calculator a lot to, create some or get some numbers. They could go into this particular view and actually add that calculator app as a application to record in the process. And then Beth on the back end, we get a notification saying, hey, your user just added this. Do you want to add this globally to the entire recording process? So there's some nice flexibility there in terms of the ability to record some new things. Users then also have the ability to pause recording at any time. So if they're, going to stop, they're going to use Chrome for, checking their personal email or whatever, they can pause it during that period and not kind of muddle the data set with, personal activities and events there. So.
And finally logs into the task mining application. Once all the invited users have installed the application, Beth is ready to start the recording, which she can trigger directly from the central portal.
And so it is really that easy in terms of once they've all set up their recorders, it's a one button click to actually start the recording and start actually recording, data into the data set that'll then be run through the machine learning algorithm.
Once recording is active, Alex simply performs his daily activities and does not need to interact with the application at all. He does have the option to see which applications are being recorded, but otherwise he can go on with his day-to-day work uninterrupted. After 1 week of recording has been captured across all users, enough data has been collected to begin the analysis phase. To begin, Beth logs into the UiPath AI Center on the same Automation Cloud platform that she used to deploy task mining. She will then launch a new machine learning package for task mining to perform the analysis on the recorded data. This part of the project only takes a few steps to run, and more importantly, no data science knowledge is required to run this analysis. Beth receives a notification email once the analysis result is ready, letting her know it's time to move on to the next phase, which is visualizing the results. For the results viewing, she invites Macy along, who knows the accounts payable processes very well and will help Beth interpret the results. Beth and Macy find a summary page of the results, which provides a high-level understanding of key metrics of the project, such as the total number of recorded hours, the number of actions captured, such as clicks and types, the applications used, and most importantly, the number of repetitive tasks that were identified as potential candidates for automation by the artificial intelligence model. Moving down, they find a more detailed view for each of the identified tasks, showing the total time spent on that task, the number of users who performed that same task, the number of traces or ways the task was completed, as well as some additional metrics to help better understand the task complexity. Task number 1 seems like the most promising automation candidate, so they decide to explore that one in more detail first. Upon opening Task 1, they are presented with a process map for the most frequent path highlighted in green. Each step shows a short description, along with the duration, the frequency count between the steps, and a start and end point to show the order of the steps. Additionally, filters can also be applied to help simplify the view and hone in on desired aspects. Once Beth clicks on one of the steps, a new panel opens showing the detailed screenshots for users to complete this step, for a quick and easy way to drill down to explore the individual clicks and types of this task. Upon review of this particular step, Macy quickly realizes that a more intuitive name for this step is to search based on invoice number, so she easily edits the name to reflect this change. After reviewing this trace, Macy realizes that this task is a vendor inquiry email process, so they also rename the task itself at the top panel. The task begins with receipt of an email and then can go to one of two different ERP systems depending on the type of inquiry. However, upon further inspection, Macy realizes that the start step should really begin with a step that was not part of this task, called Open Inquiry Email Folder, followed then by Receive Inquiry Emails. To make this adjustment, Beth clicks Recompute Task, and then can easily incorporate or reorder any of the steps for this task based on her own understanding of the process. The machine learning model will now recompute a new process graph and related metrics based on the new input from Macy.
So I want to pause here just real quick. The steps are going to be essentially grouped by that machine learning model and defined by that machine learning model. So you've got a set of steps and you see them here where it says like 2 open inquiry email folder or 18 respond to the inquiry email. Those numbers at the beginning really represent sort of the distinct activities that it can sort out from the recordings of the task interactions. So what they've done here is essentially said, hey, there's a particular task that we've seen in perhaps in another trace that doesn't appear to be included in this particular task or the model of this task. And so what they're essentially saying is, let's try to recompute this task using an additional activity that we know is out there. So we've got an open inquiry email folder activity. We want to recompute the entire task, looking rather than from the receive inquiry email activity. Start at that open inquiry email folder task instead. And then we'll get some different results based on how that's grouped and everything here. So that's essentially what we're doing here in this particular step.
This feature provides users the ability to define the ideal task steps or make some minor adjustments if necessary. To start, they click on another trace in the left-hand pane to check the details of the other traces. One feature that makes reviewing traces quick and painless is the replay function, which allows them to quickly see the steps animated and understand what the trace represents. As she reviews more details, Macy is now confident that trace number 2 is the most suitable version of this task for automation. So she clicks Save as Representative Trace and bookmarks it for quick access in the future. Having determined that this is the trace they would like to automate, they now move on to the final step of the project, the export phase.
So they were able to identify essentially one particular trace or one recording that was representative of the process and something that they potentially could use to build an automation with. And so from there,
in addition to finding suitable processes for automation, task mining can also help accelerate the documentation and development for the automation by exporting the task to a process design document in UiPath Studio file. To do this, Beth simply clicks the Export Trace button on the bottom left corner, and the files are saved. Satya, who is an RPA developer, is now ready to start building the automation based on the PDD and the Studio file that Beth has sent him.
There are a few samples of the output. And so now you're able to really start. You've got a framework for, your automation, and then you can fill in, the details and the specific steps and technical steps that you need to program in order to make that automation run. But you've got your XAML framework and your PDD document complete with screen recordings and screen capture, which really accelerates that build time. And so, yeah, that is, now we're starting to cross over into a little bit of what Task Capture does here. And so let me pass to George here, and he can kind of give us a detailed view on task capture and how that may be a little bit different from task mining.
Am I focusing just on task capture, or should I go over Automation Hub a little bit?
We've got Automation Hub in here too. So would you rather start with Automation Hub?
I am actually going to, merge them together just to kind of bring everything to Automation Hub. So we have been identifying and performing some discovery across different processes, across different businesses. Again, as we mentioned earlier, there's a way to move from that ideation phase or identification phase into adding this idea into a pipeline of automations. Where that actually happens is within Automation Hub. The tool allows you to manage that pipeline, add additional information around the process in terms of cost of running that specific process, number of people, where it's actually done, the rework that you're expecting, a little bit more insights around and assessments around that process itself to eventually prioritize it in that list as one of the future automations that you're putting in place. Let it be in the near future or along the way throughout your automation journey. And for you, again, going back to the documentation, for you to really understand that process, we've included task capture as one of these solutions for recording a cleaner, I would say, or presenting a cleaner view of that process, where an SME or someone is actually going through a, let's say, what we call a happy path of that process to eventually allow us to develop it a little bit more and include the exceptions that we're expecting throughout. So I can start to share my screen if you like, Tyler. I could go over those specific tools. So I'm going to just start with a view, and let me know when you are able to see my screen. With a view of Automation Hub. And when anybody logs in, so this is actually available to everybody across the enterprise. This is really where we're looking to crowdsource idea across the departments that we have, besides all the discovery that we're doing with process mining and task mining as well. Just a step back, we are feeding directly from those other tools into Automation Hub and creating the cards that you see here, or the ideas that you see here in terms of projects or automations to onboard and to develop. Now, the way generally things are done whenever people have access to this specific tool, they have the ability to share an idea, depending on their role, obviously, and add that to the specific pipeline. For them to be able to share that, so as you notice here, this is a little bit less scientific and data-based, more of a people's interest, people that have ideas for automations internally that like to share them with the team as well. So for you to be able to share that idea, as I go back, there's a very short survey of 9 questions to answer in the beginning. So we try to make this as easy as possible for people to participate. We don't want to discourage anyone. And the reason we've created this these 9 questions is to eventually generate an automation score for that person to know whether their idea is a potential or a possibility versus, say, you just spent 5 minutes or 3 minutes inserting information, but it's good to add. So I'm just going to go ahead and add a little bit of information just to show you what that score would look like. So a process name, I apologize for the very generic names here. So let's go ahead and actually give this a little bit more content. So invoice processing to follow up with that, those demos that we've seen. Description, receiving invoices and adding info to third-party tool, etc. The category, what team is actually performing this. So we're going to go ahead and select finance and accounting here, and I'm guessing it's account. There we go. Perfect. Great thing is that I actually use this example on purpose because sometimes we have a lot of people that are actually interested in adding these ideas and have maybe similar ideas. The tool is able to identify any potential duplicate that you've added. Try to keep this this pipeline as clean as possible. For the purpose of demo, I'm just going to continue with my idea, but this is typically a invoice processing duplicate. So I'm just going to I would typically leave that aside and add myself as a follower to this idea and enhance any information that I could within this original one is right here. So I'm just going to go ahead and continue, and invoice processing use case right here. So we start to get into the last few questions that we have. We're asking a little bit more around the business rules. Do you believe you're performing this process following specific rules that you've put in place, or guidelines that you've put in place, or is it more of a ad hoc approach? It could depend on the customer, the situation, the transaction. I'm just going to go ahead and give it an agree, because sometimes you do face exceptions. How are you receiving the data? Is it digital or is it a physical? And anything digital is something that's on your machine. So go ahead and strongly agree here. The data is formatted. So for people that are familiar with structured and unstructured data, this is where you are able to note that. So structured information is anything that falls into a form or an invoice, and unstructured is anything into an email or a contract, things that with a lot of text, things that actually change. Picking up the pace here a little bit. So you take the data, you're able to take any, and you're looking at any changes within the next 6 months. So you can see that these questions allow you to kind of evaluate really how your process is running, what documents you have, and everything needed to start looking at this automation as a potential candidate. I'm going to go ahead and just add myself as the owner and submit for review. As you can see at the end of it all, you'll get a automation score based on the submission that you just added. And within this tool, you have a kind of a validation process that allows you to go from, again, submitting that idea to assessing it within more details with additional questions and details that you can add to eventually start looking at a more, say, rounded set of information that explains how you're going to benefit from this process being automated. Now, as part of the submission that I'm doing right here, you do need to add some documentation as well. So very similar to the rest of the products that we have, we also have a product called Task Capture that is incorporated within Automation Hub. So I'm going to go ahead and show you very quickly how we get to it. As someone that has submitted an idea and probably has received an agreement or a validation on, hey, let's start to actually create this process. What you need to do is provide some documentation as usual. You can see here they did a great job at just adding some employee contract, but sometimes you need to create the documentation or the process documentation. So you can go ahead and start click on create. Whenever you have Task Capture installed, it will automatically launch it for you. And if you don't, you have the installer available to you right here, and you can actually add it to your machine and start automating. It will look something like this. It will give you, it looks something like this. Whenever I start the tool, it will give me the option to start a brand new document or get a project from my PC. As I select to start the new document, it presents me with a blank slate with the capability or the option to start either adding the fields myself by leveraging the different tools that we have right here, or automatically capture the sequences of activities that I am doing on my specific PC. And very similarly to task mining, we're going to start capturing screenshots of all the tools here because it was actually a person that started it. You can start to capture all the screenshots of the tools that you are interacting with. So I can go ahead and go to Google, leverage maybe Ashling webinar, maybe copy some information, and eventually, I do apologize for the simplicity of this process, maybe copy them into an Excel sheet here at the end of the day. Oh, this is kind of impossible to, did I not copy this? There you go. There we go. I'm just going to stop recording here for the purpose. We see Tyler's, you're going to be part of my screenshots, Tyler. As you can see here, we have some swim lanes that allow us to kind of separate which team is doing what at what specific time. And also you'd see all the steps that were captured by my tool. As I click on one of the steps, I can notice the screenshots on the right side here. everything that I interacted with on the screen. So you see that I actually navigated to another tab. And for example, I need to add some information to the screenshot. I have the editing tools and capabilities that I have right here. Something that I really like is the blur for any personal information. And I probably don't want to show who was on my recording as I was performing this, and maybe don't want to show my history below here. So I can actually do that. When I'm done with my recording and I'm actually satisfied with the sequence of activities, I probably inserted everything, I am able to export this document very similarly to the rest of our tools into a Word document for for additional documentation, a studio file, which is kind of the stepping stones for an automation, as well as a diagram just to basically export this information into an image. Very quickly going to show you what it looks like after I actually decide to export it into a Word document. You have the capability to leverage one of the templates that we have here. It's a pre-built template to add this information to what we call a process design document. I'll export it, and we will be able to visualize the information that I captured directly. That's as quick as I could go, Tyler, for the purpose of time. There's a lot more information. I would highly encourage everyone to check out all three tools. There are different versions that you can leverage, free versions versus training versions. Something very interesting to look at. And this is the document that was generated with the information from the capture. I want to show you the screenshots right here, the applications that we were using, how many clicks, and the screenshots.
Yeah, that definitely removes a lot of work from the business analyst side to put that all together. So, yeah, I think to wrap, I've got just a few kind of self-guided quizzes you can follow along with here, and I will share my screen and we'll kind of walk through capabilities of each. See if you can answer these on your own while we're kind of walking through them here. So, share my screen. So let's talk about the capabilities of each tool. So first question, which of these tools can query structured log data? Process mining, task capture. The only one of these that actually does any querying is really the process mining tool. So that's what's going to be going into your backend databases and pulling out that log data to show you your process flows. Which of these records user activity and screenshots? That should be pretty obvious from our demo thus far. I hope you get this one right. Process mining does not. Task mining, task capture, they both record that user activity and provide screenshots. So which of these tools actually could show you an end-to-end process flow across process silos, as they're known? That, I would say, is strictly process mining. With task mining and task capture, you're kind of looking more so directly within the silo, or specific teams that are working to understand what they're doing on a daily basis. Process mining is going to allow you to see how do the silos interact from for example, order management to order fulfillment to shipping and invoicing. PDD and XAML documents come out of task mining and task capture. We saw that. Process mining does not currently have that capability, as far as I'm aware. Multiple process cases and aggregate process statistics. Process mining and task mining are the two tools that would be able to do that for you. Task capture, as we saw, is really just a one-time run through so we can get the PDD and XAML documents produced quickly. Process mining and task mining are really going to show you, on a macro level, how the process gets done and what are the common deviations. This one, which of these tools can monitor your process constantly and provide analysis? This one goes again to process mining. Task mining is typically done on a 1 to 2 week study basis due to the volume of the data that you actually capture. So all those screenshots, clicks, and everything that adds up pretty quickly if you're recording, anywhere from 4 to 7 people for an entire week. So therefore, it's not feasible at the moment to actually run task mining and have that be a monitoring tool. And task capture, of course, is again that one-time kind of process run. So which of these tools could trigger automations and alerts to users? Again, that would be process mining. Again, through that kind of constant monitoring and analysis, you can actually start to trigger automations from process mining via Action Center or alerts via Action Center as well. And then which of these tools could be used to identify new automation opportunities? That I would say is those ideas are going to generate from process mining and task mining analyses. With Automation Hub and Task Capture, you've kind of got those ideas coming from either one of these tools or your process SMEs. So you've already got your ideas in the tool, and you're just going to use Task Capture to formalize it and start building it. In terms of the skills required, we'll just kind of run through these pretty quickly. But data engineering and ETL would be process mining. You're going to need somebody who understands your data, how to build a sort of or maintain an ETL pipeline would be important for that person maintaining the process mining tool. Same with kind of basic infrastructure, server infrastructure and networking, understanding how to, make those pipelines work and talk to each other. Business analysis and value engineering, I would say, are going to be process mining and task mining specifically, so that you can, analyze your process and really determine what your value is for a process improvement in that area. Perhaps could be Task Capture too, or Automation Hub here. But I think process mining, task mining kind of require those skill sets to be able to decode and interpret the results. All three are going to require some level of domain knowledge or access to domain SMEs. And then sort of understanding rudimentary ML concepts would be more of a task mining requirement here for managing and running that project. Lastly, kind of bringing it all together, if we were to look at specific use cases, if you wanted to monitor for compliance violations within your process, you would use process mining, again, for that kind of monitoring capability. If you wanted to identify repetitive tasks that your admin team is performing, that would be, again, probably process mining or task mining, depending on what level you want to see. If you want to produce a PDD document for a process recording, task mining or task capture would be the tools of choice. And if you want to kind of quickly record a single process to get that PDD file created, again, that would be more towards task capture. So hopefully we've been able to kind of demystify some of the use cases and what the differences are between each of these tools and when the right time to use them. Really appreciate everybody's time here. And if you've got any questions or anything, we can take those now. Otherwise, you can find either George or I on LinkedIn, or find us on the website. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate the time today.